This super cycle is not coming. It's here. It's here, and we better deal with it.
Buy what companies are buying, buy what governments are buying, right? Not what they're telling you to buy. So everybody's trying to make those moves now because they see a gigantic tsunami coming.
The world is in desperate need because of electrification, because of defense spending, because of AI and data centers. I'm going to predict something here. In the next couple of years, Colombia is going to become the hottest new mining region in the world.
We're here today with two esteemed members of the mining community, Frank Giustra, CEO of Fiore Group, and Ian Harris, CEO of Copper Giant. Now, Ian has been on regularly and has been on recently to talk about the development in the base metal space, and Frank, of course, has been on the show many times before, talking not only about commodities, but also the macroeconomic landscape behind why commodities move. And so I think together we have a very powerful panel explaining not just why commodities are trading the way they are right now, but also what impacts these prices have on the greater economy. We'll also be going over some recent news and developments with Copper Giant, which now announced a $31 million strategic financing deal. We'll talk more about that. Welcome back to the show, Frank and Ian. Good to see you both.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
It's my pleasure to host both of you together at the same time. Frank, I want to start with you. So a lot of people know you as, a gold guy, yes, a mining guy, but more a gold guy. Yeah. And it's not like you've never been involved with base metals before, but I think more and more you've been talking on the media about copper and the significance of copper. And I think the first question I and some other people who have followed you for years might ask is why you've become a little more interested in the public domain, at least, in base metals.
Well, it's you're right. I've been for at least 25 years a gold guy, talking mostly about gold. But it's like, with everything that I've learned about the copper market, it's like having two children. You love them both, but deep down you have a favorite. So for me, that's always going to be gold. But gold is a completely different commodity than copper, and it's going to go up for very different reasons than the reasons that are driving the copper price. But listen, just the bottom line is that we're standing on the brink of a supply cliff for copper. Okay, it's not like the era of this super cycle is not coming. It's here. It's here, and we better deal with it. And I think we can profit greatly from it. We're facing a supply deficit in copper over the next number of years. We're going to have probably a 35% supply deficit by 2035. That's going to be about 8 million tons and about 10 million ton supply deficit by 2040. And we don't know where this copper is going to come from. Nobody knows. I know the chairman of Rio Tinto quite well, and we were having this conversation about a year ago, and he goes, we don't know where this copper is going to come from. You've got all sorts of problem with the copper supply side. You've got very old mines. Some of them are a century old, and the grade is declining rapidly. And therefore, it's going to take a lot more energy, a lot more moving dirt to extract that lower and lower grade. Mm-hmm. And then you've got, this adding fuel to the fire. You've got these supply disruptions that are taking place in places like the DRC, Peru, and Chile, and that's just not helping at all. These disruptions are happening for different reasons. And the era of global codependence, that's over. So you've got China now restricting copper exports, and the world has woken up to the fact that with these supply deficits coming and the globalization era over, where are we going to get this copper? And that's why you're seeing the copper price starting to move up now. It's catching up, but I think it still has a ways to go because the physical market is tightening a lot faster than the paper market suggests. So I'm very, very bullish on copper.
Ian, you've told me that I think they've counted 6 major copper mines built in the last decade against roughly 24 needed, with 17 years from discovery to production, roughly. Now, most of the copper production today is in South America, Chile being one of the dominant players, and your project, Copper Giant, is based in Colombia. How strategically important will South America be in the coming decades if copper is a strategic metal actually classified as a strategic metal by the United States government. And like Frank said, and you said prior to on my show as well, that we're going to be in a severe deficit. How is that going to change the entire geopolitical landscape around the world?
So we see what the world does when it needs resources when we just look at oil. So it is quite frightening what could actually happen over the next decade. And Frank helped explain the setup, right? Instead of building new mines, they just made old mines bigger and grade went down, and they just kept trying to get more and more and more blood out of a turnip, right? So now that it's time where they're going, we're in big problems. You see the reaction. I called it the COVID toilet paper moment for copper. Is you see treatment charges going to zero. You see stockpiling going through the roof, and people are going, "What do you mean copper prices going up? Look at the stockpiles." But they're only stockpiles are going up because people are panicking. And to steal a quote that I use a lot from Frank is, "Don't buy what the government tells you to buy. Buy what the government's buying." And government is buying the heck out of copper right now, and so are companies, right? Because they're trying to get ahead of it. So then you look around at the solutions. We haven't been exploring enough. We've been under. There's the budgets and exploration have gone ridiculously low. We're not discovering new deposits. That's another scary graph if you look at the amount of discoveries. And then you say, well, where are the biggest copper mines actually come from? Where are the jurisdictions where you could find easy and quick production, which means near surface? And we found most of it, right? There's like Mark Gibson, who is one of our directors, a renowned geophysicist, worked for Friedland for 15 years, right? Is like, there's only like Kazakhstan and Colombia, right? Because for the different reasons why they were never explored. So we saw that there's not enough deposits, and there's definitely not enough near surface deposits, because the other option is to build deep ones. The new project in Poland is 7 years just to do the shaft, just to get down to the mineralization. I mean, look at the Filo de Sol development times. So the point is that obviously Colombia is positioned extremely well because it's one of the last remaining unexplored areas that has a high potential to see new discoveries near surface, of which we have 130,000 hectares, and Mocoa is proof of the potential in that area and very other few locations in the world. But overall, once the world wakes up, right, we're used to this codependency, as Frank and you both explained, right? And the world is kind of like, we need more power. We need more of this. And they're just going down the line and then they're going to finally look at it and go, fix that part. And it's, 20 years from discovery to bring a new or more now that the projects are getting deeper. And so as countries are stockpiling, figuring that out, there's also this decoupling of globalization going on. And so it plays a huge part in where countries are going to be paying attention. And of course, South America is extremely strategic for the United States, which obviously leads into the environment here in Colombia that literally today is inauguration of a new president.
Frank, so just to dovetail off of what Ian said, Frank, the quote that he was mentioning is, buy what the governments buy. Well, earlier in the year, the U.S. government intended to start stockpiling critical minerals, including copper, $12 billion critical minerals stockpile. The U.S. Export-Import Bank will provide $10 billion in debt financing for the effort, named Project Vault. Now, the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve was set up in 1973 in response to the Arab oil embargo, to prevent the U.S. from suffering a catastrophic oil shortage should that happen again. And that's actually playing out exactly right now during the Iran war. What do you think the U.S. is preparing for when they're setting up a $12 billion vault of critical minerals?
Well, I think the U.S. is preparing for something that they've been definitely behind the eight ball on, and just recently came to the realization that with the end of globalization and with China's dominance in critical minerals, that they have to play a very, very fast game of catch up. And it's desperation in what they're doing. The U.S. has, maybe a couple of copper deposits that it can put into production. It's going to have to rely on allied countries for that copper supply. And Colombia is the America's closest ally in South America, always has been. So that's certainly beneficial for the Mocoa deposit. But it's really it's a desperate attempt to catch up with reality. And reality is that we have this incredible copper demand as a function of a whole lot of things: electrification of electric vehicles, solar, wind, increased defense spending. Trump is pushing for increased defense spending in the U.S., and he's getting it, and that's forcing its European vassal states to ramp up as well. So everybody's ramping up in defense spending, and that requires a lot of copper. So, as Ian mentioned, it's decades of underinvestment is finally coming home to roost. And again, the U.S. has to look elsewhere for these partnerships and alliances to access this copper. So I think any country that is deemed friendly to the U.S. is going to be in a very, very good position to access funding if necessary, or other types of strategic partnerships.
Ian, I've had a guest on my show recently talking about how the base metals, and copper in particular, has been moving basically as a mirror of the stock market. And the stock market, being the S&P or the NASDAQ, is comprised mostly of tech stocks right now, being the largest, I think, weighting sector. Do you feel, or do you, based on your observation and discussions with investors, are you feeling that your stock is basically moving in lockstep with AI and the AI build out?
I think to a certain point, but all these stocks move for different reasons, and there are different stages of development. The reason that our stock is moving is because we have demonstrated that we're well over 1 billion tons, which is what majors will require. If you're going to put tremendous amount of capital, billions of dollars into developing these, you want to make sure it's got a long, long life. And, with a billion tons, once you're over 1 billion tons, you're in a whole different category. So, yeah, no, I think it's been, the realization that we have that, and that we're going to now have both the capital and the political climate in Colombia to develop this thing quickly. I think that's what's inspiring people to have a closer look.
Okay, let me just pull up a chart of both copper and Copper Giant stock. So I don't think it's any surprise to people that Copper Giant stock moves in lockstep with the copper price. So the copper price being the blue line here, left side y-axis, and the Copper Giant stock is the bar chart here. Copper has been moving higher, which we can discuss, but there's been a huge upward move in just the last couple of days. So earlier in the week, Copper Giant had a big pop. Anything happen in particular that may have caused this?
Well, Ian can address this part.
Yeah, and so David, I think you're seeing two things on that chart, and we saw it before when you said copper was trading like gold, and then all of a sudden it started trading like the stock market, and that is the same place where Copper Giant is catching back up. And I think it is that you're seeing a rotation. There is nervousness in AI, and they're treating copper differently for whatever reason. It could be, as you said, because they see AI together with copper, or they see it as more resilient or more safety, or whatever reason, right? But obviously, our biggest move in the last few days was our big announcement. Copper Giant historically has been extremely undervalued. I would argue a huge difference between the price and the overall value. That is a big delta, but that has been justified by insecurity or market perception of Colombia. So today we literally have a new president coming in who is an extremely pro-mining president. At the same time, we are announcing a $31 million financing that provides a strategic partner with Trafigura. We also talk about it's like musical chairs, and then the second, nobody wants to make the move because they want to minimize their risk, but there's just not enough projects sitting around. It looks like somebody didn't want to miss the opportunity and understood that this wasn't going to be on the table long, and better to get into it now, right? So We've got a wonderful strategic partner that also has lots of operating experience in Colombia. We have a team that's done it before. We have sponsorship. We have copper going the right direction. Colombia is going the right direction. I think we have everything that we're telling market. We have absolutely everything we need to continue to deliver that, like we've been doing over the last year.
The government, the newly elected government of Colombia, is not just supportive of mining, but he's supportive of Mocoa in particular. And we'll talk about the financing deal with Denarius Metals in just a bit. But leading into that, why do you think the government, the newly elected government, is going to be a boon for not just metals in particular in Colombia, but Copper Giant in particular?
Well, I think that basically it's a pro-business government, very much aligned with the current administration in Washington, D.C. And anything that provides growth is going to be welcomed going forward here. And mining, obviously, is both mining and oil and gas. This new president is very pro both those areas because Colombia is very, very mineral rich, but has been underexplored for many reasons throughout the last number of decades. That's all changing now. I've been operating in Colombia for 35 years. With the same, mostly with the same management group that is now with Denarius, and we know how to operate in that country, and the Denarius management knows how to operate in that country, and that's going to be very helpful because, as you know, I'm involved with Eris Mining, which I co-founded some 6-7 years ago, and it's now Colombia's second largest gold producer, and soon will be the largest in the next 3 to 4 years as we put more mines into production. But we've operated quite well in Colombia because we know how to work with communities. And that is the most important part, not the federal government, but communities. And we've learned to cooperate with the communities in a way that they really welcome our investments in that country. And ARS is the perfect example of how that's worked really, really well. And I think Ian has taken the exact same approach with respect to developing the community relationships around the Mocoa deposit. Maybe he can speak to that. But with the federal government now that's, putting a new mining minister, a new environment minister, they all have a singular focus. Get these resources online. That's going to create tremendous revenue for the country. It'll create jobs, and it will address the critical minerals shortage that the world is looking at.
Okay, Ian, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this president has been staunch on what he cares about, the economy and security, and that's it. Like nothing else is on his platform. It is the only thing he cares about. I've had a lot of questions recently. Well, does he say that? How he's going to be? We're watching. And I think based on everything that I see here, based in living in Colombia, this guy is going to be coming out of the cannon like a rocket, right? He is laserly focused on moving the Colombia's economy forward. And I think definitely sees by the ministers that he's putting in place, the things that he wants to do on day one is focused on delivering on those promises from the very beginning. So you have a world that needs copper. It's really hard to find. There's very few big billion-ton deposits sitting anywhere, and you still don't know how many you have in your country. It's a project of size and scale that can move the GDP of your country, right? And so, of course, the other part that Frank said is that the political capital required, because we spend so much attention from the day one, focusing on developing the relationships with the community that is surround us, making them partners in the things that we do. Right. I suffered for the last 3 years because we put a lot of attention on those things and really didn't get the value in market of what that delivers. But that's why there's only been 6 big copper mines built in the last 10 years, because most people don't get that or wait too late. So we've developed that model from the very, very beginning. And that makes it a whole lot easier also for politicians to put their capital into it, because we've set up a base that makes them successful, makes us successful, makes the community successful, and makes the nation successful. So, we talk about that or I've been talking about that for an extremely long time, and now it's showing, and this is now the result, right? This is why you do all of these things, because everybody is aligned, and now we're also making sure that this project is going to develop 100% in alignment with what Colombia wants to do. Now that we have a president that says, let's go. And they've said, openly, right, that major strategic metals projects in this country, we are going to accelerate, right? And, Mocoa sits on top of the list.
Okay, so Colombia hasn't had a history of nationalizing mines on the same scale as Venezuela and Bolivia, but I was looking this up earlier. Apparently, the minerals in situ in the ground belong to Colombia. This is according to a 2014 report that I read. I wonder if this has changed recently, and the president is addressing this, because an investor might ask, well, how would you price in the risk that regulatory policies around who owns the minerals underground in the soil would change?
Yeah, it's a red herring, because this is extremely common in so many countries where they are the underlying owner of the mineral wealth, right? And then so we are, through a title process, are an operator, right? It's very, very, very normal. And I think one thing that is very clear, right? Colombia's 50% of its exports are coal and oil. It has developed around a financial and construction industry. There are very few levers it has left to pull. And that is another reason why it's so focused on this metal space. Really, because it's been underexplored, it's also created the opportunity when the world really, really, really needs it. It's truly one of the big levers that Colombia can pull right now to attract massive amount of investment, and aligned with its number one ally. At the same time, their number one ally, right? I think every single day I look at the news, the new president or somebody in his cabinet is meeting with somebody in the United States on how to align and bring in that investment.
Okay. Frank, earlier when you said that the government is just more pro-business overall and how that's beneficial for mining, what, practically speaking, are we talking about when it comes to more pro-business mining regulatory policies? And what can we expect from changes in policies?
Well, the number one change is to not be an obstructionist, to get out of the way. And, that in any country in the world, including Canada, that's what we ask mostly of governments: just step out of the way. Don't slow things down with over-regulation, double permitting, systems. And so what we expect from the government is just policies that allow us to move these projects forward, put them in production, and exploit the projects. And that is as simple as it gets. We don't need government money. We just need them to be supportive and streamline the permitting process, and essentially just stay out of the way. Just adding what Ian was saying, I'm going to predict something here. In the next couple of years, Colombia is going to become the hottest new mining region in the world, because of this change in government. It'll be because of its incredible mineral wealth and the fact that it's been underexplored for so many decades. So I think you're going to see the same geology that you're seeing down in Peru and Chile exists in Colombia. It just hasn't been explored to the extent that these other countries have been explored and developed.
And I would argue that it's easier to get to. Right? It's way easier to get to, because you look at Argentina and it's all on the very, very high Andes. It's very hard to get to. It's very hard to develop. It's massive infrastructure. And because Colombia has had such a strong construction industry, when we constructed Mirador, our local partners for local construction companies were all Colombian, right? It already had that industry. We depended on Colombia for that to be able to build Mirador. And it has that infrastructure, it has the power lines, it has the roads, and it's not sitting up at 4,000 meters. And it has the endowment that has been underexplored. So I am 100% in agreement with Frank. It's one of the few places that's left to really, really look at and find elephants.
Suppose the new Colombian president and President Trump and Mark Carney sat in a room together and talked mostly and just about mining. Okay, mining rights, mining regulatory policies, and the future of mining. What do you think they would agree on and disagree on? And what I'm trying to get at is the heart of how these countries approach mining.
I'm just trying to picture them, three of them in a room. I can't get past that visual. Well, I think Actually, on the subject of critical minerals, I think they would be greatly aligned. It's just they're going to have differences in other things like security and immigration and what have you. But on the critical mineral side, they would be saying, how do we cooperate? At least Canada and Colombia would say, how do we cooperate? And hopefully the U.S. would come along. But no, I just think that that's the singular issue.
But do you think Canada, just going, we're based in Canada here, is on the road to becoming less obstructionist?
I think so. I think, obviously we would like it to be always better, but I tell you, it's 1,000 times better than the last administration in this country. And so I think Carney is doing a fairly good job of changing the approach to building the necessary infrastructure that allows for the development of these resources, which are many are very, very remote, require infrastructure like roads and rails and ports, and you need LNG plants. There's so many things that Canada can do, and is, I think, attempting to do. The interprovincial relationships play a role in all of this, and I think Carney's doing a fairly good job. I'm not going to criticize him, although I didn't vote for him, but I think he's doing a fairly good job.
Okay. Just in the last week, there were, I think, two strategic announcements, or I guess it's part of one, but I'll let you comment on both. So first, the definitive agreement with Denarius Metals Corp. To make a strategic equity investment into Copper Giant, and separately, the offtake agreement with Trafigura. I'll let whoever wants to take this first. Yeah, go ahead, Ian. Please tell us more about. Let's start with the strategic equity investment by Denarius. And
yeah, it's all concurrent, so it's kind of one in the whole thing. And I think you want to start with, where are we, right? In November of last year, we passed 1 billion tons. At 1 billion tons, we know that the project will continue to get better, but nobody builds a project bigger than 1 billion tons. You have a project, right? So we are now seeing, and then at the same time, and we've been talking now for years about this, sooner or later, we knew you'd have a new president, and during that presidency opens a political window. You have a 4-year window to get it done. So we are checking the boxes. We have the resource size. We have the team. We've done it before. We've got all these things, and now it's time, based on now we know who's going to be the new president, is how fast you are going to go. And so we looked at the dial and said, from 1 to warp speed, we better just try to go to warp speed. And what are the additional things that we need to do to now get this project getting and making sure we've got everything in line? We need to have the equity in order to continue to accelerate and know that we can get the job done, bring in the more drills, get the engineering done. We know what we're doing. We just needed the capital. But we also now need to navigate very quickly through a new political situation in Colombia. We're bringing in a Colombian board of director who has been literally working on some of the things we know we are going to have to do, which is working on developing the political will, working on making sure we maintain our national reputation, doing all the things that resonates and make sure a project this size and scale continue to move forward. We need to give credibility to market, and Trafigura, is an obvious strategic partner to order to say that, hey, if they're in, then there must be a reason this project is so good. It just checked so many boxes for us in order to say this project not only is the quality we say it's been, Colombia is now going to be changing. That is the big underlying undervaluation on the project, and also allow us to move as quickly as possible and continue to deliver on de-risking and moving this thing closer to a construction decision.
Okay. Both of you, according to this news release, have agreed to a 2-year lockup arrangement in connection with the financing. Tell us about that decision.
Well, yes, it's Denarius, myself, and Ian collectively are locking up our shares for 2 years. And that is to basically signal to the market that this is, the strategic I've been a strategic investor in this thing from the beginning. So, once I went over 10% and close to 19%, I was basically saying, I'm going to see this thing through. This is not a trade. This is an investment that I'm going to see through right to the end. And when Denarius came in with this investment, we basically had a conversation. We said, are we both on side that this we're going to see this project through until its fruition. And they agreed. I said, let's lock up for 2 years. That sends a great signal to the market of how much we believe in this project. So that was the basis of that.
And where we want to take it to, right? So it's not a short term. We know the value this project should have. We know it's nowhere close to where it should be, and we know that we're going to grind and do the time that's necessary to get it to where it's, valued to where it should be properly valued, and drive it towards a production decision.
Yes, and according to this press release here, Copper Giant will be issuing shares on the order of, I believe, 40 million.
That's correct. 40 directly to, I think, to Denarius. It's a little bit more of that altogether. Notwithstanding this deal, just generally speaking, as a CEO, how do you address shareholder concerns of dilution every time you do issue shares?
Can I answer that? Because
sure.
I've been doing this for a very, very long
Yes.
time. Financed hundreds of companies over the years. Listen, the mineral exploration and development game is all about equity. You need money to move these projects forward. You have no cash flow to rely on. You can't take on debt. You have no other choice but to raise equity. The trick is, and my philosophy has been, always, as you're raising equity, look forward the next 12 months. What are your needs to make sure that if the markets change, anything changes, you've got adequate capital to get the job done. That's the number one objective. And my trick, what I think about, and it's not always perfect, but every time the stock doubles, you're okay to raise equity. The last round we did was at 40 cents. This one's at 72, because it's almost a double. And the financing prior to the 40-cent financing was around 20 cents. So the market forgives you, because the market understands that you need equity to raise these things. As long as you're raising them in a rising valuation way, then this is the nature of the business, that you can't develop these things without money. You need equity.
How much of this deal was predicated on the fact that copper is at all-time highs? In other words, the market has determined this financing. And how much of the new election in Colombia has also contributed to the success of this deal?
I think from the point of view of Trafigura and Daenerys, it was certainly the political landscape change was very important, and the copper from Trafigura's point of view, they are more than aware of the critical supply deficit that's facing us, and so they're trying to get their hands on physical metal, and hence the offtake agreement for 20% of our production. So yeah, both the copper price and the political change in political landscape have played a role. But it's also the deposit. This deposit, since we announced over 1 billion tons, has been on on the radar of many majors, I can assure you. And we've been approached, and as
Weekly.
you know, this business, you just kind of field calls, and
Right.
and you pick your moments if required.
Okay, so
Yeah. Listen, I would
Please.
argue that knowing what I know, right? Obviously, I can't name names for obvious reasons, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of interest. It's just a matter of risk tolerance. And so I think Trafigura basically said this might be the last chance before everybody blinks, right? We have to move. We have to be first movers, or we're going to miss the opportunity. And there's not broad deposits sitting around like Mocoa around anywhere, right? There are like 6 of us, right? And some of them are really problematic. Some of them are very difficult. There's very few, but there's a lot of buyers, right? There's a lot of big companies that with very, very big checkbooks. I think Glencore just announced they're trying to raise trillions of dollars in Australia, right, to deploy over the next period of time, right? Everybody's filling their coffers. They're getting their war bands together. And so I think that was a big part of it, because I think they realized that today's inauguration in Colombia, they might have been on the ground closer, have a better indication of what's going on, and knew that the world would, the whole world would be looking at Colombia in a very short period of time.
Copper Giant will grant Trafigura the right and obligation to purchase 20% of the copper concentrate and 20% of the moly concentrate produced from the Mocoa project. This is a statement from the Trafigura director. Our long-term offtake at Mocoa reflects both our confidence in the project and our strategy of working with producers to bring new supply to customers around the world. If I were a shareholder of Trafigura, I would ask, why so early? This is a project that, correct me if I'm wrong, but hasn't even published its first PEA yet. And so
I think you just answered my own question.
Yeah.
I got my own statement as exactly what I said, because I don't think that it is rare. We don't even have our PEA out yet, right? And they're already moving because they realize that it is going to be a musical chair moment, and that is just around the corner. It is 20%. It's a 10-year term. It is a finger in the door, right? So I think in terms of total risk for Trafigura, it's pretty darn low. But I think that exact statement is a demonstration of what is actually happening in the world. And I'm going to steal Frank's: buy what companies are buying, buy what governments are buying, right? Not what they're telling you to buy. So everybody's trying to make those moves now because they see a gigantic tsunami coming.
I'm going to come back, Frank, to this gigantic tsunami and what this means for markets. We'll close off on that segment. There's a lot to dissect there. $30 million, $31 million of gross proceeds. What is your first priority with that cash?
Oh, the number one priority is to make sure that we are accelerating in all areas that are on a critical path towards getting to construction. Right. So we have, luckily, we've done this before. So we know how this process works. Mark Gibson, one of our directors, literally got the first open pit copper mine license under Cordoba in Colombia. He went through this process before. So we are mapping it out, not 6 months ahead, but what this looks like over the next 2 to 3 years of how to get it towards production and make sure that we are minimizing that critical path, right? And I think the other piece of it is that we haven't, all of our efforts have been focused on the Mocoa deposit, when we also know that we have one of the few districts. We have 130,000 hectares and one of the last prolific copper belts that hasn't been picked over near surface, right? So it is also thinking about at least a little bit of effort towards those next steps, right? What other deposits are sitting inside of this belt that we have, and what's the overall potential of this belt? Because I think we can see the attention that it will bring.
I've heard so many times, Frank, from people in the industry, if Frank Giustra is involved in the project, it's going to be easier to raise money. Okay, I mean, that statement's kind of like, the sky is blue in the mining space for quite some time, but just why? I mean, what have you done in your career that separates you from other strategic investors?
Well, first of all, it's never easy. I don't care who says that it's easy to raise money in this sector. It's not.
Easier.
Perhaps.
Okay.
But no, it's always been a difficult thing. Listen, everything in this world is about reputation and track record. So it's quite simple. I've been doing this for a very, very long time. I've been part of the creation of a number of very large existing global mining companies over the decades, especially the last 25 years. Prior to that, I was an investment banker that ran a firm that specialized in mining finance and became one of the best at it in the industry in the 80s and the 90s. So, when you have a track record, people go, well, what has Frank done before? And you just look at it was, Gold Corp, huge success, silver, Wheaton Precious Metals now, but it began as Silver Wheaton, was our creation. Endeavour Mining, one of the largest mining companies in Africa, gold mining companies, Leia Gold, which is now part of the Equinox group of mines, and then more recently Aris, and many, many, many others in other, I've done it, other metals as well. So it's really about, when you've done it all before, you've made a lot of mistakes along the way, and this is how you learn never to do those mistakes again. And I've just been doing it forever, so I've made every mistake possible. And so I know what not to do. It's not always clear what to do, but you certainly, once you know what not to do, the mistakes that most people make, and the number one mistake that I've witnessed by junior mining companies over the last few decades is they fail to bring the communities on side. It's just such a fundamental thing that needs to be done. And many companies with their arrogance, whatever, I don't know what drives their thinking, But if you don't get the communities on side, as we've done with Eris and we're doing with Copper Giant, you're sunk. Okay, and so
Yeah.
that's the mistake we never make. And we have developed approaches even in Canada, working with indigenous communities. We created the first indigenous owned public company in Nations Royalty. And then we partnered with the Selkirk Nation in the Yukon to bring back the Minto mine. And we brought them in as partners as opposed to just getting their blessing. So it's just understanding how to make things work and not making dumb mistakes.
Ian, a question for you. So Frank's had an extraordinary track record of successes, just to name a few that he's listed already. But that doesn't change geology. I mean, one could raise capital, but it doesn't change the rocks in the ground. And the junior mining business is a business full of examples where smaller deposits have attracted a lot of capital, but never actually become a mine. And so what separates Mocoa from another project that's never become a mine from a geologist perspective?
So I would argue that, to be successful, you need the asset, you need the team, you need the sponsorship, and you need the right timing, right? You need all those 3 or 4 things coming together. But in a very previous life, and a project most associated in the exact same Jurassic belt is Mirador, where I witnessed how this is and went in and made a massive amount of mistakes. I went in as a mining engineer and left going, well, all these tools that I had to actually build mines are totally useless. It's more about developing the relationships, getting a community involved, getting the political will developed, having the national reputation, all these other bits and bobs. And I remember Ken Shannon saying, you know what, it's a whole lot easier just to unlock these projects and get them on the right footing than it is actually to discover them, right? The geological risk is massive on projects. And at Mocoa, right, we had a 600 million ton deposit that was already sitting there. And the problem with 600 million tons is it's way too big for a junior to build, but it's too small for majors. So people were just kind of overlooked it, right? But the problem was it wasn't drilled out. It was drilled by a gold company looking for gold, and they didn't find it. And they said, stop wasting money on it. Right. So in that aspect, there's just not very many of them sitting near surface. This project was developed over 10 million years. There's only like 3 districts in the world that have been developed over 10 million years. That shows kind of all this copper that was going into it such a long period of time, which means most of these porphyries are very similar grade, but we also have high grade breccias. About 20% of the project runs a 0.94 copper equivalent. It has all the bits and bobs that you would like with an asset. But then the other part is, can you mine it? And then you say, okay, it's at 1,300 meters. You're next to power lines. You're next to roads. Your town is 10 kilometers away. You don't have a remote camp. Nobody lives in the project area. Is also checking all those boxes. So I think one of the frustrating parts in this is that we overly focus on the deposits, right? In our industry, we overly focus on it when our real destination is how to build mines, right? I mean, that is the purpose of our industry, right? That is the reason we exist and why our value should go up, is our ability to actually convert these into mines. And so Mocoa sits in a very, very small club of near surface deposits, not already in a major over 1 billion tons. There's like 6 of them, right? So, I mean, there's just not very, very many of them. And I would argue what shines about Mocoa is that our ability to build it.
I want to finish up and come back to why investors should care about the critical mineral space. We started off talking about that. Let's go for a full circle here. I'd like to get your reaction to this, Frank. I don't think I've ever shown you this tweet. So analysts have mentioned the divergence between copper and gold, especially since May. I've talked to Ian about this. Robert Friedland retweeted this. Copper is the new safe haven. I'd like to ask if you agree or disagree with this. You're involved with both metals, so interesting to get your perspective here.
You know, Robert Friedland always comes up with the best lines. Okay, I've known this guy for 40 years, and he's the best. I've never seen this tweet before, but I get the point he's making. It's like the world is in desperate need because of electrification, because of defense spending, because of AI and data centers. It's in dire need of something that there's very little supply of. There's not enough supply of globally. So. And every country on the planet requires copper for everything. electrical grid, which in the U.S. is, was designed in the 60s and the 70s. It's falling apart. It's going to require anywhere between 700 billion and 1.4 trillion dollars to upgrade the electrical grid. And that's all copper. So I get it. I get the point he's trying to make, is that if you don't have access to copper supply, you're not safe. That's my interpretation.
Ian, let's say hypothetically the US or Canadian government says, look, this is a strategic national security problem as of now, for whatever reason. Here's $3 billion to start production in North America, not South America. Could that be done? Like by in 2 years' time, go start a mine, Ian. You got a good track record. Just build us a mine here in North America. We don't want to be dependent on foreign influences. Yeah,
they have said it, right? So don't forget it. That those conversations are absolutely happening. They just don't want to set out spark panic, right? Those conversations are happening, and I think what United States and Canada are learning, right, is just going, let's go, America. They've also created the bureaucratic mess that is really difficult to unwind. Right. Frank said it early that the best thing the governments can do is get out of the way. Right. And so I've worked in South America since 1999, and I've worked with a lot of governments, and I've had great close relationships with these governments. And they normally go, we want to incentivize mining. So we're going to announce that we're going to make a new mining law. And I tell them, for the love of whatever, don't do that. Like, that is the worst possible signal you could give market. You just said you're going to be uncertainty. Right. Petro took the ranking of Colombia, that was the second highest ranked reputation in South America, based on policy, to 83 out of 87 countries in the planet. And not one policy actually changed. Right. Mm-hmm. It was just he got in the way. Right. His ministries got in the way. So the infrastructure in Colombia is good, but it's very heavy in the United States and Canada. So I think the real conversation, and we see this actually in the conversations we have with U.S. government officials, is there's definitely a band that goes, we should do this at home. And the others go, you don't know how hard it is. We should do it nearby. Right. If you look at those 6 big mines built in the last 10 years, 2 are Peru, Ecuador, Panama, Congo, right? And I'm missing another country in Africa. Oh my goodness. But none of those are Argentina, Chile, Canada, United States, Nevada, Arizona. None of those are on that list when they are ranked as the highest and best jurisdictions in the world. Because it's very hard and takes a lot of time to build things, right? So my answer would be, no, you wouldn't be able to do it, right? Even if the desire was there, because the bureaucratic system is so big that it would take too long to actually get through it. And then the second problem you have in the United States is those deposits are getting pretty deep.
This, Frank, one more question for you, please. This is, it's not just where the mining takes place, it's where the smelting takes place. So this is from the IEA. Since 2005, China has accounted for over 90% of growth in copper global smelting, increasing its share of global capacity from around 15% to 50% by 2025. Smelting utilization rates have also diverged sharply since 2020, falling below 70% outside China, while remaining around 85% in China. Suppose, and we've seen what happens to oil once a major choke point in the Strait of Hormuz is blocked. Suppose China were to say, we're going to stop exporting refined copper just because. What happens to the market?
Well, that would be a very, very... and you brought up a good point that most people miss. It's not about copper production, but it's about the processing. It's almost more important for the processing and refining, in which China basically controls it in all critical minerals, including copper. So again, that's something that the West has now woken up to. It's a reality that the West has woken up to. And obviously China has to play this game. It's multi-dimensional chess in its relationships with the U.S. and the rest of the world. Copper is one lever that it has when Trump makes certain tariff threats, and I don't know if you've noticed, but since the tariff threats began, China has quietly sat back and given Trump the polite middle finger. It's not buckling. It's going to use the levers that it has, and it has plenty. And critical minerals is just one of them. to basically allow its geopolitical competition with the U.S. And this is a game of two global powers looking for dominance. And so I think that, yeah, it is a problem. And, the problem with the processing and the refining side, the infrastructure that needs to be built to compete with China, requires a lot of money, many years of lead time, things that are not going to happen in the next 5 years, which is, in terms of the copper supply deficit, it's just not going to be in time.
Just one more question, and we'll close off. Just sidetracking here, Frank. Do you think that China, being a competitor to the U.S., do you think they helped the U.S. during the Iran war by not importing oil? I've heard this theory that maybe they reached some sort of deal, and China completely dropped its oil imports in the second quarter.
That's an interesting theory, and I've heard it, obviously a few times. I mean, China has its own reasons to keep the oil price down, and it was well prepared with its reserves, strategic reserves, to allow it to weather this storm for a period of time, and it's worked well so far, where it doesn't have to buy as much oil from the international market. So it has helped to keep the price down. What its motivation? A secret deal with the U.S.? I'm not sure I would buy that, but it's possible. But China looks out for China's interests, and this was in China's interest to keep the oil price down. And they were, like I said, they were well prepared.
Okay, Ian, let's finish off with you. Congrats again on this new offtake agreement and the financing deal. So, what is the next major milestone that investors need to watch for? Again, the company has raised $30 million in change. New offtake agreement, new shareholder structure. So what can we expect next, and when can we expect it?
Yep. Well, we had the capital to get through to our next major catalyst. This gives us absolutely more runway, allows us to be more aggressive to make sure that we stay on schedule. I would argue the biggest catalyst for the company is literally happening today, and every single thing that the changes perception of Colombia and market is going to have a really big impact on our project. But the big one is the PEA, a preliminary economic assessment that will be coming out before the end of the year. And this one's important because it changes the way the project is valued. Instead of just a cents per pound in the ground, it provides a net present value, which is a NAV for a company. And we really think, we love the deposit, but we also love where it's located, the infrastructure that surrounds it, the cost structure of Colombia, et cetera, et cetera. And so that any sort of reasonable valuation on that NAV is extremely, extremely attractive. So it also provides a dot on the wall that gives a destination the market can more easily understand what this project could actually be worth. So it should be a really big catalyst for us, that PEA coming out. It's the first time financials have been wrapped around a project. And it also puts us on a nice value proposition, because as you continue to de-risk, that PNAV should get higher and higher and higher. And they're really big numbers compared to the amount of spend. And we have the capital to be able to deliver on it.
Okay.
So it's a very big catalyst. And of course, hopefully, we've been putting out for almost 2 years some incredible drill holes on this project, and market is just kind of looking us, blinking. And I think now that all of that drilling is also going to continue to bring eyeballs onto this project. It continues to put out on a weekly, monthly basis, some of the best copper drill holes on the planet, right? So we will continue to have that news flow too.
We look forward to Copper Giant's development in this tsunami of new trends in the critical mineral space. So let's follow up again. Congratulations to both of you for this new deal. And we look forward to following your journey. Thank you very much, both Ian and Frank.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. Please do follow Copper Giant. I'll put the link down below to their website, ticker CGNT, and we'll put their news release as well. Thank you for watching. Please do subscribe and like this video.